Madam President, I thank the distinguished senator for her kind comments. As she knows, this is an issue that whether it's Washington State or the state of Vermont, it is a major issue. And she has voted for and supported the Leahy-Crapo bill, as has the distinguished presiding officer. And I've said so many times on this floor that violence is violence is violence, abuse is abuse is abuse. And this should not be a partisan issue. 2 weeks ago in Tampa, Republican leaders from Congress and around the country sought to make clear their commitment to advancing causes important to women. Well, I'll say as a Democrat, I was pleased to see that commitment from the Republican Party. But now I hope to put those words into action and prove that this was not just campaign rhetoric. And so I would, if not asked me for advice, I would give some advice to my Republican friends. If they do want to show that commitment to women, one significant step Republicans take would be to help us reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act. That was signed into law 18 years ago today. 18 years ago today. I remember that day. I was there as one of those who helped draft it. I was so proud to see it signed into law. This landmark bill, which fundamentally changed the way our country responds to domestic and sexual violence, expired, though, 1 year ago this month. Now, there's no good reason why we can't all work together and see this life-saving law is reauthorized immediately. This should not be a Republican or Democratic issue. It is an American issue. How can people say that they're not opposed to violence against women? Just yesterday, the Republican Attorney General from Utah and the Democratic Attorney General from Maryland, people of completely different philosophies, called on Congress to pass the Senate bill. It covers all victims, including immigrant women. In their guest column in Politico, the two noted the bipartisan Senate bill would give a significant boost for law enforcement and public safety. At the same time, they said the politically charged House bill seeks to turn a bipartisan concern for abuse survivors into a partisan wedge and dramatically rolls back important protections for battered immigrant women and their children. And I ask consent that a column be made part of the congressional record at the end of my comment.
Without objection.
Now, you hear these continued calls for action. We know that the Leahy-Crapo reauthorization bill passed the Senate with a strong bipartisan majority of 68 votes. And note one thing, it was voted for. Every woman in the Senate, Republican, Democratic alike, voted for it. But Republican leaders in both the House and the Senate have hidden behind a procedural technicality. They've refused to allow the House to vote on the Senate bill. Well, that obstruction has to end. Too many lives are on the line to play these political games. Here in the Senate, we've twice asked Republican leaders to agree to take up a House revenue bill, substitute the bipartisan Senate VAWA bill, send it to the House immediately to overcome this procedural concern. And each time, they've refused this common sense resolution. You know, this contrasts how we moved forward earlier this year using the same process to overcome similar technical hurdles with both the transportation bill and the FAA reauthorization legislation. So just a little bit of cooperation from the other side. We can move VAWA now. Now, people watching this and listening to it might think, well, these technical, arcane procedures, and they are technical and arcane procedures, but they're stopping us from moving forward with the Violence Against Women Act. We can set them aside for transportation and FAA, both important things. But if you're somebody who's been battered and abused, if you're near death, don't talk to that person about technicalities. Madam President, I've said many times on this floor, I still have nightmares from some of the crime scenes I went to as a young prosecutor. It's always at 2 and 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. The ones easiest to handle were those where the victim lived, although sometimes just barely. I remember riding in the ambulance with the victim on the way to the emergency room to find out what happened. Many other times we were there waiting for the coroner to arrive because the body was on the floor. I wish everybody who is hiding behind these technicalities could come with those of us, both parties, those of us who have been prosecutors, have gone to those crime scenes. And I guarantee you they'd be back here and saying, get rid of those technicalities. I cannot understand the House Republican leadership hiding behind this excuse to avoid debating and voting on the bipartisan Senate bill. This is a good bill that brought Republicans and Democrats together in this body across the political spectrum. The House Republican leadership should stop blocking it on this obscure technicality. The Speaker can waive the technicality. The House could vote on the Senate bill anytime. And I'd like to see people stand up and say, yes, I want to stop violence against women, or I'm going to vote no. Right now, they're allowed to vote maybe. No victim wants to hear maybe. No victim wants to hear maybe. They want us to do something. Both in the House and the Senate, we have a privileged position as members. Don't hide behind a technicality. Have the courage. Have the courage. Stand up, vote yes or no. The House Republicans could have allowed a vote on the text of the Senate bill as a House amendment or House bill. Instead, they're choosing to hold up VAWA reauthorization for all victims. Please reconsider. Move forward with us to protect all victims of violence. And if you're unwilling to do that, if you're going to stand behind this, don't go home and campaign and say you have a commitment to women. Battered women are in all categories. They go across all political spectrum. They go across all economic spectrum. Don't go back home and say, I'm standing up for you. No, you're not standing up. You're hiding. You're hiding. You're hiding behind a technicality. Well, these victims can't hide. They are sought out, and they become victims. Let's do something for them. Our bill was developed with the input of victims and the service providers who work with them day in and day out. It helps women who are victims of terrible crimes, the very people that we claim we want to support and protect. Now it does so in important and responsible ways. Don't go home and say, I stand up for all of you. Don't go home and say, I'm standing for law enforcement. Don't go home and say, I want people protected when you refuse to step around a procedural motion and protect them. Don't be that hypocritical. Now, we have only a few precious days left this Congress to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act. The Republican leadership wants to help end domestic and sexual violence. Well, then do so. Now's the time to act. Don't hide behind fiction. Have the courage to stand up and say you're on the side of victims. And if you're not on their side, then stand up and vote against them. Don't vote maybe. Don't hide. It's time to make good on our promise to the victims of these horrible crimes, helping them no matter who they are has to be our goal. Their lives depend upon it. Our lives don't depend upon it, but their lives depend upon it. They're counting on us, Madam President. It's time to stand up.